The mahogany desk gleamed under the fluorescent lights of Hartwell Associates, its surface reflecting the trembling hands of three siblings who hadn't been in the same room for over 2 years. I sat in the middle chair, my palms sweating against the burgundy leather armrests, stealing glances at Marcus on my right and Vivian on my left. The tension was thick enough to cut with a butter knife. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Thank you all for coming, said Eleanor Hartwell, Dad's longtime attorney, as she adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and opened a thick manila folder. At 73, she moved with the deliberate precision of someone who'd delivered life-altering news countless times before. Before we begin, please accept my condolences on the loss of your father. Theodore Blackwood was not only a client but a dear friend for over 30 years. Marcus shifted in his seat, his expensive suit rustling. At 35, my older brother had inherited Dad's sharp jawline and calculating eyes, but none of his warmth. Let's just get this over with, Eleanor. We all know why we're here. Vivian shot him a withering look. Show some respect, Marcus. Dad's only been gone 3 weeks. Her voice carried that familiar edge of moral superiority that had driven me crazy since childhood. At 32, she'd perfected the art of making everyone else feel inadequate while maintaining her image as the family's golden child. I stayed silent, picking at a loose thread on my jeans. At 29, I'd always been the black sheep, the one who chose art school over business, who moved across the country to pursue photography instead of joining the family construction company. The one who Dad barely spoke to for the last 5 years of his life. Eleanor cleared her throat. Theodore was very specific about how he wanted this handled. He recorded a video message that he insisted I play before reading the will. She turned a laptop toward us, her finger hovering over the play button. Are you ready? We nodded, though I wasn't sure any of us truly were. Dad's face filled the screen, looking exactly as I remembered him from our last argument, silver hair perfectly combed, steel gray eyes that missed nothing, and that permanent line between his brows that deepened when he was disappointed. Which, in my case, was most of the time. If you're watching this, I'm dead. His voice was steady, matter of fact. No emotion, no sentiment. Pure Theodore Blackwood. I've spent considerable time deciding how to distribute my assets, and I want you to understand my reasoning. He paused, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker across his face. Regret? Sadness? But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Marcus, you've dedicated your life to building our company into something bigger than I ever dreamed. You've sacrificed personal relationships and followed every piece of advice I ever gave you, even when it cost you your marriage. The business is yours, along with all commercial properties and investments. You've earned it. Marcus sat up straighter, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Of course. The golden son gets the golden prize. Vivian, you've always been my conscience, reminding me to give back to the community. Your work with local charities and your dedication to making the world a better place has made me proud every day. I'm leaving you the lake house in Vermont, the cabin in Colorado, and a trust fund of $2 million to continue your philanthropic work. Vivian's eyes filled with tears, and she pressed a hand to her chest. Oh, Daddy, she whispered. I felt my stomach drop. Of course he'd leave me out completely. I'd been preparing for this moment since he stopped returning my calls, but hearing it laid out so clinically still felt like a punch to the gut. Dad's image continued. As for my youngest child. He paused again, and this time I was certain. I saw his mask slip. Just for a second. Cassandra has always marched to her own drum. She chose a path I didn't understand, in a world I never valued. We fought about it constantly, and I said things. I regret. My breath caught. This wasn't what I'd expected. Cassandra, you get the house. The family home where you grew up, where your mother lived and loved and raised you all. It's yours, completely and without conditions. The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. I stared at the screen, certain I'd misheard. The house? The massive Victorian mansion on Elm Street that had been in our family for 4 generations? The house worth easily $3 million, Marcus shot to his feet. What? That's impossible. The house was supposed to come to me with the business. We discussed this. Sit down, Marcus, Eleanor said firmly. Let him finish. But she doesn't even live here anymore. Vivian protested. She hasn't been home in over 2 years. Dad's voice cut through their objections. I know this comes as a surprise, especially to Marcus and Vivian. But Cassandra loved that house in a way the rest of us never did. She saw its history, its character, its stories. She understood that some things are worth more than their monetary value. I felt tears prick my eyes, remembering all those afternoons I'd spent as a child, exploring every hidden corner and secret passage, photographing the way light fell through the stained glass windows, the way shadows danced across the hardwood floors. The house has a story to tell, Dad continued, and Cassandra is the only one who ever bothered to listen. The video ended, and Eleanor closed the laptop. That concludes Theodore's message. Now, let me read the official will to make everything legally clear. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was reeling from the impossibility of it all. Dad had given me the one thing I'd never dared to hope for, not just the house, but acknowledgement that he understood me, even if he'd never been able to show it while he was alive. Eleanor's voice droned on, confirming what Dad had said. Marcus got Blackwood Construction and all business assets, valued at approximately $15 million. Vivian received the vacation properties and the trust fund. And I got the house on Elm Street, free and clear. This is bullshit, Marcus muttered, loosening his tie. She doesn't deserve it. She abandoned the family. Maybe Dad wanted someone who actually loved the house to have it, I said quietly. Love doesn't pay property taxes, Vivian snapped. Or maintenance costs. That house is a money pit, Cassie. You'll be bankrupt within a year. They weren't wrong. My photography business was barely breaking even, and I had maybe $3,000 in savings. But somehow, that didn't matter. Dad had seen something in me worth honoring, and that was worth more than all the money in the world. Eleanor gathered her papers. That concludes the reading of the will. Cassandra, you'll need to sign some documents to officially transfer the property. The rest of you have paperwork to complete as well. I suggest we wait. She stopped, her hand freezing over the folder. There's one more thing. My blood went cold at the tone of her voice. Marcus and Vivian, who had been whispering angrily to each other, fell silent. Eleanor opened a smaller envelope, her expression troubled. Your father left specific instructions that this was only to be revealed after the initial will reading. He wanted to see your reactions first. She pulled out a single sheet of paper and a small brass key. Theodore discovered something in the weeks before his death. Something he'd been searching for his entire adult life. He left this note with instructions that Cassandra, and only Cassandra, should read it. My hand shook as I took the paper. The handwriting was Dad's, but shakier than usual, as if he'd been ill when he wrote it. Cassandra, if you're reading this, then you've inherited the house, and my plan worked. Your brother and sister don't know what I'm about to tell you, and it must stay that way until you decide what to do with the truth. Behind the bookshelf in my study, there's a hidden room. You'll find the entrance by pulling the leather-bound copy of Wuthering Heights, your mother's favorite. Use the key Eleanor gave you. What you find in that room will change everything you thought you knew about our family. It will also explain why I really gave you the house. The choice of what to do with this knowledge is yours alone. But remember, some secrets are buried for good reason. I'm sorry for the distance between us. I hope you'll understand why it was necessary. Your father, Theodore. I read the note 3 times before the words fully sank in. A hidden room. A family secret. And Dad had made sure I was the only one who would find it. Marcus reached for the paper. What does it say? I folded it quickly and slipped it into my pocket along with the key. Just some personal things. About Mom. Cassie. Vivian's voice had taken on that patient, condescending tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. If it affects the will or the estate, we have a right to know. It doesn't, I lied, meeting her eyes steadily. It's just Dad being sentimental. Eleanor was watching me carefully, and I could tell she knew more than she was letting on. How long had she been keeping Dad's secrets? Well, then, Marcus said, standing and straightening his jacket. I suppose that's settled. Congratulations, Cassie. Enjoy your white elephant. He headed for the door, then paused. But when you can't afford to keep it anymore, remember that I offered to buy it from you fairly. I never said you did, I replied. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm saying it now. $500,000, cash. That's more than generous for a house that old. The house is worth at least $3 million, and you know it. Not to someone who can't afford to maintain it. He opened the door. Think about it, Cassie. You've got my number. Vivian lingered as Marcus left. Are you sure you want to do this? Take on that responsibility? It would be different if you lived here, but you're in Portland. How can you manage a property from across the country? I'll figure it out, I said, though I had no idea how. She sighed. You always were too stubborn for your own good. But I suppose Dad saw something in you that the rest of us missed. She kissed my cheek, a gesture that felt more like obligation than affection. Call me if you need anything. I mean that. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with Eleanor. You knew about this, I said, holding up the key. The hidden room. She nodded slowly. Your father came to me 6 weeks before he died. He was agitated. Said he'd found something that changed everything. He made me promise to make sure you got the house and the key, no matter what. What did he find? I don't know. He wouldn't tell me. But Cassandra. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Be careful. Theodore was scared, and your father wasn't a man who scared easily. I pocketed the key more securely. What aren't you telling me? Eleanor hesitated, then shook her head. It's not my story to tell. But your father was right about one thing, some secrets are buried for good reason. Just think carefully before you dig them up. As I walked out of the law office and into the late afternoon sunshine, my mind was racing. The house was mine, but apparently, it came with more than just mortgage payments and maintenance issues. There was something hidden in Dad's study, something important enough that he'd restructured his entire will around it, something that had scared him. I drove through the familiar streets of Millbrook, the small New England town where I'd grown up, past the elementary school where I'd learned to read, past the park where Mom used to take us to feed the ducks before cancer took her. When I was 12, everything looked smaller than I remembered, like a movie set designed to imitate real life. The house stood at the end of Elm Street like a Gothic sentinel, its 3 stories of weathered brick and ornate woodwork casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn. Dad had always insisted on having a landscaping service, even after Mom died. Appearances matter, he used to say. People judge you by how you keep your property. I sat in my rental car for a long moment, just staring up at the house that was now mine. The late afternoon sun caught the stained glass window in the front parlor, sending jeweled light dancing across the porch. This was where I'd learned to walk, where I'd taken my first photographs, where I'd fought with Dad about my future and stormed out for the last time, and somewhere inside, hidden behind a bookshelf, was a secret that had changed everything for my father in his final weeks. I climbed the front steps, my footsteps echoing hollowly on the old wooden boards. The key Dad had left me years ago for emergencies still worked, and the front door swung open with a creak that transported me instantly back to childhood. The house smelled like lemon oil and old wood, with an underlying scent I couldn't identify, something dusty and forgotten. Dad's housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had clearly been maintaining things, but there was a stillness to the air that spoke of recent loss. I stood in the foyer, surrounded by family portraits and antique furniture that had been here since before I was born. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, the only sound in the massive house. To my left was the formal dining room where we'd eaten Sunday dinners in uncomfortable silence after Mom died. To my right was the parlor where Dad used to read his financial magazines while classical music played softly in the background, and straight ahead, past the grand staircase with its carved banister, was the hallway that led to Dad's study. My heart was pounding as I made my way down the familiar corridor, past the oil paintings of long-dead Blackwood ancestors who seemed to watch my progress with disapproving eyes. Dad's study door was closed, just as it had always been when he was working. I turned the handle and stepped inside. The room was exactly as I remembered it, dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk positioned to overlook the back garden. Dad's reading chair sat empty by the window, a book still open on the side table as if he'd just stepped away for a moment, but my eyes went immediately to the bookshelf on the far wall, scanning the leather spines until I found what I was looking for, a first edition copy of Wuthering Heights that had belonged to my mother. I approached it slowly, the brass key burning like a coal in my pocket. Whatever was behind that wall had been important enough for Dad to restructure his entire estate around it. Important enough to keep secret from Marcus and Vivian. Important enough to scare him. I reached for the book, and as my fingers closed around the spine, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to cross a line I could never uncross. The book pulled free with a soft click, and something inside the wall shifted. A section of the bookshelf, about 3 feet wide, swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow opening. Cool air flowed out of the darkness beyond, carrying with it that same dusty, forgotten scent I'd noticed when I first entered the house. But there was something else now, something that made my skin crawl, the smell of secrets long buried. I pulled out my phone and activated the flashlight, then stepped through the opening into the hidden room my father had discovered in his final weeks of life. What I found there would haunt me forever. The hidden room was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, with stone walls that felt centuries older than the house itself. My phone's flashlight beam swept across the space, revealing wooden shelves lined with boxes, old photographs, and documents yellowed with age. But what made my breath catch was what dominated the center of the room, a large wooden table covered with newspaper clippings, police reports, and photographs that looked like they belonged in a crime scene investigation. I stepped closer, my hands trembling as I picked up the nearest newspaper clipping. The headline, dated 37 years ago, made my blood run cold. Local businessman Harold Chen found dead in construction accident. Harold Chen, Mrs. Chen's husband, who'd supposedly died in an industrial accident when I was too young to remember. Dad had always been generous to Mrs. Chen after that, paying her well above market rate, helping with her children's college tuition. I'd thought it was kindness. Now, staring at the police report underneath the newspaper clipping, I realized it might have been something else entirely. The official report was brief. Harold Chen, 34, killed when scaffolding collapsed at a Blackwood construction site. Ruled accidental death due to equipment failure. Case closed within a week, but someone, my father, presumably, had annotated the margins in red ink. Equipment inspected the day before, no issues noted. Chen was experienced, never ignored safety protocols. Scaffolding was new, recently installed. By BC Crew. My hands were shaking as I set down the report and picked up a photograph. It showed the accident scene, but this wasn't an official police photo. This was taken from a distance, showing the collapsed scaffolding, but also something else, 2 figures standing near a truck in the background. One was clearly my father, much younger but unmistakable. The other was a man I didn't recognize. But they were shaking hands. A handwritten note was attached to the photo. Payment received. H. Chen, problem solved. RM. I scanned the other documents on the table until I found what I was looking for, a business card for Robert Morrison, construction safety inspector, City of Millbrook. The pieces were falling into place like dominoes, each one more horrifying than the last. Harold Chen hadn't died in an accident. He'd been murdered. And my father had paid a safety inspector to cover it up, but why? I found my answer in a manila envelope marked, Chen Investigation. Inside were photocopies of financial records, bank statements, and what looked like internal company memos. Harold Chen had been an accountant for Blackwood Construction, and he discovered something in the books that my father desperately wanted hidden. The memos, written in Harold's careful handwriting, detailed systematic fraud, falsified building inspections, substandard materials passed off as premium grade, safety corners cut to maximize profits. Harold had documented everything, and according to his notes, he'd planned to take his evidence to the authorities. He'd never gotten the chance. My God, I whispered into the dusty air. Dad, what did you do? But there was more. So much more. The next box contained documents spanning decades, more suspicious accidents, more convenient deaths, more cover-ups. A whistleblower who died in a car accident after questioning the stability of a Blackwood-built bridge. A city councilman who'd suffered a heart attack the night before he was supposed to vote against a lucrative Blackwood contract. A journalist who'd committed suicide while investigating construction corruption in Millbrook. My father hadn't just been a successful businessman. He'd been a killer, eliminating anyone who threatened his empire, and now I understood why he'd been scared in his final weeks. Because someone else had discovered his secrets. At the bottom of the pile, I found a letter dated just 2 months before Dad's death. The return address made my stomach lurch. Chen Family Law Offices, Portland, Oregon, Portland. Where I lived. With shaking fingers, I opened the letter. It was addressed to Theodore Blackwood and written in crisp, professional language, Mr. Blackwood, my name is David Chen, son of Harold Chen. I believe you remember my father, who died at one of your construction sites 37 years ago. I have recently come into possession of documents that suggest my father's death was not the accident your company claimed it to be. I have evidence of financial fraud, bribery, and what I believe to be murder. I am prepared to take this evidence to the FBI, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to confess and make amends first. My father deserves justice, and the families of your other victims deserve the truth. You have 30 days to respond. If I don't hear from you, I will assume you intend to take your secrets to the grave. David Chen, attorney at law. My phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering on the stone floor. David Chen. I knew that name. He was a civil rights attorney in Portland, someone I'd met briefly at a gallery opening 6 months ago. We'd talked about photography, about art, about the way light could reveal truth in unexpected places. He'd been hunting my father's secrets, and somehow, Dad had figured out the connection between David and me. That's why I'd gotten the house. Not because Dad loved me or understood me, but because he needed me positioned here, in Millbrook, close to his secrets. He'd known David Chen was closing in, and he'd made sure that when the truth came out, I'd be the one to control it. But there was one more document, this one in Dad's handwriting, dated just a week before his death. Cassandra will find this room, as I intended. By now she knows the truth about Harold Chen and the others. She also knows about David Chen's investigation. What she doesn't know is that David Chen has been watching her for months, not because he suspects she's involved, but because he's trying to understand what kind of person she is. Whether she's like me, or whether she's different. Cassandra, if you're reading this, know that I never wanted you to be part of this world. That's why I pushed you away, why I criticized your choices, why I made you leave. I thought distance would protect you from what I'd done, but David Chen found you anyway. And soon, he'll find this evidence. When he does, you'll have a choice to make. You can destroy everything in this room and let the truth die with me. Or you can do what I never had the courage to do, make things right. I'm dying, Cassandra. Cancer, like your mother. I have maybe days left. I chose to end my life on my terms rather than face what's coming. But you still have time to choose who you want to be. The house is yours, but more importantly, the choice is yours. I love you. I always have. That's why I pushed you away. He sank into a chair I hadn't noticed before, my mind reeling. Dad hadn't died of a heart attack. He'd killed himself rather than face justice for his crimes. And he'd left me holding the bag, forced to choose between protecting his legacy and exposing the truth. My phone rang, jolting me back to the present. The screen showed a Portland number I didn't recognize. Hello? Cassandra Blackwood. The voice was calm, professional, familiar. Yes. This is David Chen. I think we need to talk. My heart stopped. How did you? I've been watching the house since your father's funeral. I know you inherited it, and I know you found the hidden room. I can see the light from your phone through the basement window. I looked around wildly, realizing for the first time that one wall of the hidden room had a small window at ground level. Through it, I could see a figure standing in the backyard, phone pressed to his ear. Don't run, he said gently. I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to talk about your father, and about my father, and about the choice you're going to have to make. I hung up and sat in the darkness for a long moment, surrounded by evidence of my father's crimes. David Chen was right outside, waiting for me to decide who I was going to be. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from David Chen at the kitchen table where I'd eaten breakfast every morning as a child. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the same gentle demeanor I remembered from the gallery opening. You've seen everything, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. How long have you known about your father's crimes? 3 years. About you specifically? 6 months. He pulled out a tablet and showed me a photograph of myself at the gallery opening. I've been investigating your family for a long time, but I needed to understand what kind of person would inherit Theodore Blackwood's empire. Whether you were complicit, or whether you were just another victim. And what did you decide? He smiled sadly. That you're nothing like your father. That you chose art over money, truth over profit, distance over complicity. That maybe there's hope for justice after all. I stared at my hands. What happens now? That depends on you. He leaned forward. I have enough evidence to destroy your family's reputation and put several people in prison, including the safety inspector who helped cover up my father's murder. But most of the actual perpetrators are dead now. Your father, Robert Morrison, others. So why not just go to the FBI? Because I want more than just justice. I want accountability. I want the families of the victims to be compensated. I want your father's company to be held responsible for decades of corruption and fraud. He paused. And I want it to come from someone inside the family. Someone who can testify about what they found, who can authenticate the evidence, who can make the world understand that not everyone named Blackwood was a monster. I looked up at him. You want me to turn against my own family? I want you to do what's right. What your father never had the courage to do. And if I refuse? Then I go to the FBI tomorrow with everything I have, and your family's name gets destroyed anyway. But the victims' families get nothing, and Marcus continues running a company built on blood money. I thought about Marcus, so proud of his inheritance, so certain he'd earned it. Did he know about Dad's crimes? Had he been complicit, or was he just another victim of our father's deception? Marcus doesn't know, I said finally, about any of this. He was just a kid when most of it happened. David nodded. I believe that. Which is why I'm hoping you'll help me find a way to do this that doesn't destroy the innocent along with the guilty. We talked for hours as the sun set outside the kitchen windows. David showed me his evidence, his investigation notes, his plans for bringing the truth to light. He'd been methodical, patient, determined to get justice for his father and all the other victims, but he'd also been careful not to paint everyone with the same brush. He understood that children weren't responsible for their parents' sins, that businesses could be reformed, that sometimes the best way to honor the dead was to help the living make different choices. There's something else, I said as the conversation wound down. In the will reading today, my father left specific instructions that only I should know about the hidden room. He made sure Marcus and Vivian would be kept in the dark. He was protecting them, David said. Or trying to. He knew what was coming, and he didn't want them to have to carry the burden of his choices. But he left it all to me. Because he saw something in you that he didn't see in them. The courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where I'd played as a child, before I knew what my father was capable of. What do you need from me? Help me build a case that focuses on accountability and restitution rather than just punishment. Help me make sure the victims' families get what they deserve. And help me figure out how to reform Blackwood construction instead of just destroying it. I turned back to face him. And in return? In return, I make sure everyone knows that Cassandra Blackwood was the one who brought the truth to light. That she chose justice over family loyalty, integrity over inheritance. I could lose everything. The house, my relationship with Marcus. And Vivian, everything Dad left me. Yes, David said simply. You could. But you'll be able to sleep at night. I thought about my father's letter, about his final challenge, choose who you want to be. Okay, I said. Let's do it. 3 months later, I stood in a federal courthouse in Boston, my hand raised as I was sworn in to testify before a grand jury. David Chin sat at the prosecutor's table, his evidence meticulously organized, his case airtight. Marcus was in the gallery, his face a mask of betrayal and disbelief. Vivian had refused to come, unable to reconcile the father she'd loved with the monster I'd exposed. They might never forgive me, but David had been right. I could sleep at night. The truth came out slowly, methodically, each piece of evidence. Building on the last. Harold Chen's murder. The decades of fraud and corruption. The other victims, finally given names and voices in justice, but David had kept his promise too. The case focused on accountability and reform rather than just destruction. Blackwood Construction was placed under federal oversight, its profits redirected to a victim compensation fund. Marcus was allowed to stay on as a managed CEO, working to rebuild the company's reputation under strict supervision. The house on Elm Street became my permanent residence. I opened a photography studio downtown, specializing in documentary work that exposed corruption and gave voice to the voiceless. The house's hidden room became my darkroom, the place where secrets once hidden were now brought to light. Mrs. Chen came to see me a few weeks after the trial ended. She was in her 70s now, her hair silver, her hands spotted with age. But her eyes were bright with something I'd never seen before, peace. I always wondered, she said, sitting in my kitchen where she'd served my family meals for decades. I knew Harold didn't make mistakes, didn't ignore safety. But I couldn't prove anything. I'm sorry, I said. For what my father did. For all the years you worked for the man who killed your husband. She reached across the table and took my hand. You are not your father, Cassandra. You chose differently. That's what matters. David stopped by that evening, as he had most evenings since the trial ended. We'd grown close during the investigation, bonded by our shared commitment to justice and our understanding of what it meant to lose a parent to another person's greed. Any regrets? He asked, joining me on the front porch as we watched the sunset. Paint the sky in shades of gold and amber. I thought about Marcus, who still refused to speak to me. About Vivian, who'd moved to California to escape the scandal. About the father I'd thought I knew, and the father I'd discovered in that hidden room. No, I said finally. Dad was right about one thing: some things are worth more than their monetary value. Truth. Justice. The ability to look at yourself in the mirror. He'd be proud of you, David said. For choosing the hard path. I wasn't so sure about that. But I was proud of myself, and maybe that was enough. The grandfather clock in the foyer chimed 9 times, the same sound that had marked the passage of time in this house for 4 generations. But now it marked something else, the end of one family's legacy of secrets and the beginning of another family's commitment to truth. Some secrets are buried for good reason, Dad had written. But some truths are worth digging up, no matter how much it hurts. I'd chosen to dig. And in the end, that choice had set us all free. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.